For this video, I'm going to leave myself off the screen so we can have maximum screen coverage. So we are where we left off with our table in our Rhino file. And just to remind you, we have a bunch of the kind of like, standard automatic layers. And we have one layer that we named table. And then we put the objects, the surfaces and polysurfaces that we made in the last video onto that layer. So now we can get rid of this and make stuff in the default layer, and then bring it back when we want it. We can also do interesting things like kind of select it all at once and things like that. So I promised you lamps, and lamps we shall do. We are going to make 3 simple lamps. And by doing that, there's nothing kind of particularly special about the idea of a lamp, although it is certainly something that exists in lots of interior spaces. My sort of thinking was that it's a good way for us to just kind of explore some of the different ways of building form in Rhino. So, and it could potentially, relate to both of the projects. So, I'm going to start by making a floor lamp. And to make a floor lamp, in this case, I think it actually would be good for us to have the table layer on, just as a sort of reference for height. One thing I'm going to do, I don't really care that much at this point about the placement of the table. But I do kind of want it to be on the x-axis just for height purposes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the move feature, and I'm going to select the entire table and then hit enter. And I'm going to select a point to move from, and making sure that I have ortho turned on, which it is up here. I'm going to go ahead and just pop it up to the x-axis here. So it doesn't even really have to be straight. We just want to get it up there. And so now you can see we have it sort of like aligned with that 0 point. And that is just going to be slightly useful for when we go to potentially, make other things. So we can use it as a scale reference. There's another way to kind of pull the scale of an object in Rhino, just for your own knowledge. You can go up here to dimension, and if you go to linear dimension, that's going to come up with the dimension between 2 points. So we could start with the bottom of the leg and just go up to the top of the table. If we hit shift, it'll put it in ortho automatically. And you can see we have this, text output that's telling us it's about 3 feet and 5 inches, which is, exactly what we told it to be. Some time has elapsed, and so that's good for me to know. So, basically for a floor lamp, generally speaking, kind of a floor lamp is, between 5 feet in height. So that would put us up to, I guess, about here. I'm going to go ahead and create just a tiny little line here up at the top. And I'm going to use that as like a reference line. So if this is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, we can just kind of eyeball that. I'm going to just make a tiny little line up here, and that's going to be my reference point for where the top of the lamp neck goes, and then the actual lamp shade is going to go above that. So at this point, I could get rid of my table, and I certainly don't really need this measurement anymore, although if I have a bunch of measurements, that's another thing that I would, when I'm working, I usually do prefer to have those kind of on their own layer. So I can call that layer measure. And so that way, if I need to kind of call them up, I can do that really easily. And so right now I can push that measurement object onto the measure layer by saying move objects to this layer. and then turn off the measure layer. I can also turn off the table layer now that I'm kind of done using it as a scale reference. You also might notice that even though we have kind of a, it looks like right now, at some point when I was not on video, I went ahead and shifted my grid to a 1 inch by 12 inch grid. So let me show you briefly what that looks like. So what we have here is on the grid we have well, you know, actually this is not what I intended. I cut and pasted some things from a different file. So I'm going to fix the grid to be the way that we designed it in the previous example, just so everything's consistent. So we wanted a minor grid line every 4, and we were also in inches, I believe. Working in feet can be kind of okay. In this case, we don't want to scale the model. I don't think so. Hopefully that won't be an issue. And we want major grid lines every 4 minor grid lines, and we want minor grid line every 0.25 inches. So we basically have a cell for every full inch. And our snap spacing, I think we were using 0.25. So again, I'm just restoring kind of what we had. And that was my mistake. I was actually doing some of my own work, and I started working on the file that we were working on, and I had to kind of mosh these things apart. So just for fun, what am I working on? Like everyone, I'm working on my sort of fantasy organization project. So I have all these lab drawers that I got from the chemistry lab, and I'm making big countertops with drawers. So a thing you can do with Rhino. So anyway, back at the ranch, let's make a lamp. I think we're all ready to go here. It does look like our little scale reference got a little bit what I would use the technical term kind of whacked out. So I think I'm just going to take everything that exists in the file and kind of scale it up to the appropriate size. And so for my reference, excuse me, that's the move function. So for my reference point, I'm just going to use 0, 0, and then I'm going to use the top of the table. And we had kind of decided, I think that was 3.5 feet, right? So the only reason that I'm having to do this, by the way, is because of that glitch with the grid. So now I'm all fully restored. And again, sorry about that. Should probably edit it out, but you know, people, you may have to at one point fix your grid, so it could be useful for you to see that. So we are going to make a lamp, and I think for this lamp, it's sort of like envisioned as a floor lamp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a kind of straight up and down wavy sort of curve, and I can do that by kind of zooming in here. I want to think about scale a little bit, so I have a 1 inch grid at this point, which is what you should have at home. And I think I'm going to make kind of almost like a circular curve. So I'm just going to come in like that for now. And if I'm being kind of slick, I might be actually making something that can be repeated. And so that might look, instead of sort of having to draw this really complex tall curve, so what would that look like? Well, I guess for starters, it would have this sort of distribution of points. So I'm kind of just in the middle of deciding where I want to put these points. And I think I want to have kind of two sharp edges. This isn't necessary, but of course it is necessary that they line up. So that's fine for now. And one thing that's really great about the points system in Rhino is that you can take these points. I kind of put them on sort of a right angle grid. You certainly don't have to do that. You can kind of pull them out. You can play with them. This is about 3 inches. So that would make, if we revolve it, that would make the thickness of our lamp post like, about 6 inches. So I don't want it to go too much further than that. I can actually also take multiple points and select them. And then think about actually moving them as a whole if I want to kind of stretch or scoosh an object, as I sometimes like to say. So this would be a little bit more of a slender kind of figure for the lamp. To make sure that I can repeat it, I can just cut and paste it. And then I can just take, I can take the, it's got multiple copies here now, you can see, and when I click on it to choose objects, so I can take one of these objects and just pop it up to intersect with the other one. So that is kind of getting me to a place where I feel pretty good about that. Probably what would be slightly better is for this exact point to kind of line up. So I'm just going to go back one step, and instead of doing the kind of click and drag thing that I just did, I know I've said this before, it is better to actually go to the move object. So we're going to select this object to move. And when you do that, you can be very precise about what point you want to line up with what point. So this way you can see here we have no overlap and the points are butting up against each other exactly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have that piece up here. Okay, that's great. So that's going to kind of be my limit for how many of these I make. And what I think I'm going to do, I may not use this second copy, but I think I'm going to take this first copy right here and do what's called a linear array. So we're going to have a couple of opportunities in this video and probably in future videos to use the array function. And the array function is a really powerful way of basically making lots of different copies of something in a way that you specify. So the linear array is the most simple. It's basically just taking one object and making a row of them. There are also, you can make an array on a curve. You can make an array that's circular. There's all sorts of different ways to do arrays. So if you go over here to the array command, we're going to start with just a linear one because it's the most simple. And select object to array. There it is. And then press enter. Number of items. Well, we don't really know right now, so I'm just going to kind of guess and say, let's go for 10. And then it gives us a first reference point. So the first reference point I usually do, because I want these to butt up against each other exactly, I usually do this just the scale of the object. So here we could go ahead and make this obviously the first point, and then the second point would be the second sort of edge of the object. And that looks just wonderful. That's pretty much what I wanted. So it looks like we may have a little bit, no, my gosh, that's exactly right. That worked out really well. So now we don't actually need this little line here. That was just kind of a visual reference for me. But what we do need is we need to now take these curves, and instead of having lots of little curves, I would like to have one curve. So you can see down here it says 11 curves added to the selection. And so what I think I would like to do is I would like to use the join function here, and that's going to make them all into a single curve. And so you can see now we kind of got some reports down here. It says 11 curves were joined into one closed curve and one open curve. So that seems reasonable, I guess. For some reason, it didn't join this last one, so we may have to kind of force the issue here and just hit join again. Okay, that's great. So, so it's kind of right now just rejecting this one as an open curve for some strange reason. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to take this and make this sort of my lamp for purposes of time. If you wanted to kind of troubleshoot that more, what I probably would do to fix that would be to take one from up here and just replicate it. But for me, well, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So, let's see. So I'm performing a join, and it won't let me. That's great. I'm going to go back one step further to before I joined those objects. And I'm just going to delete this one. And I'm just going to do literally a cut and paste because there's something about that curve that Rhino is not digging. So I'm just going to replace it and see if that helps. So I'm going to use the move function to move it from its endpoint to the endpoint down there. And then we should be able to now grab all of these objects, all these curve objects, and they should join successfully. Yes, good. Rhino can be kind of picky and weird sometimes, and you basically just have to push through it. Or just be flexible. So we could have also just taken the whole lamp post curve and made it a little bit longer by stretching it. That would be another way to kind of deal with that as a problem. So now I'm going to take this lamppost, and I do want to have a little bit of space going through it. So I think I'm going to take this curve and just move it out a tiny bit. And by a tiny bit, I mean, well, let's see, about a half an inch, so maybe in slightly. And now I'm going to go ahead and revolve it. So I'm going to use the surface revolve command here. And for me, the sort of start and stop of the axis for this one would be pretty much the z-axis of the workspace. We could just use that, and we want it kind of straight up and down. So we can do the full circle command, and then yeah, that's great. So we have a sort of like lamp post here. Now we're going to need a couple of other features to this lamp. Lamps aren't just made of posts, so we're going to need some sort of like light object on the top, and then we're also going to need some sort of like base to make it a little more stable. So we probably will end up getting rid of this this thing on the bottom anyway. But the other potential way that we could address the base, I'm going to just undo that revolve. We could actually just move some of these points around and kind of make a more graceful transition so that it has a little flange at the bottom. So let's go ahead and whoa, hello, hi stocks. Was a swipe error there. So let's go ahead and just think about that idea of having a base. And we're sort of like fictionally maybe going to make this out of metal, so it doesn't have to be really huge to kind of stabilize the lamp effectively. It just needs to be like about a foot or so in diameter. So that will actually be great. So we can now just use that as and all we did was move those points. So it just kind of goes to show you like how powerful the point editing can be. So now if we pick this up and revolve it again, we kind of don't have to make that a separate step. So here, I'm going to pick up the z-axis, and you know, just as another kind of alternative, you can actually make your axes super short if they're going in the if they're pointed in the right direction. It shouldn't matter. The length of it doesn't matter. It's actually all about the direction. So in this case, we were able to kind of just do that. And you can see now our lamp has a base and it looks a little bit less maybe like gravity defying. So I think at this current moment, I'm going to leave the lamp up here, but I am going to go ahead and start a layer that is called maybe floor lamp. And on that layer, I'm going to go ahead and stick this sort of finished poly surface or finished surface. It is a poly surface. And the reason for that is that I'm going to go ahead and draw the top layer or the kind of top of the lamp. And so I want to keep some of the lamp, like these curves, available for just scale reference, but I don't really want to, if I have the poly surface visible and I go to start drawing, it's going to kind of like snap like crazy. Of course, I could just turn my snaps off by disabling them, but I actually don't want to disable them all. So, you know, it's kind of maybe a way of getting around some of this snapping stuff, which can be kind of crazy. And I usually just kind of turn on these snaps and then I don't really mess with it unless I have a really good reason to turn them off. So let's see, I want to make a polyline. No, not so much. I think what I'm going to do is, I think the actual lamp shade is going to be, you know, kind of cylindrical as well. But I'm going to use the top view to kind of scale it because I want the lampshade to actually be a little bit wider than the base. So I'm going to just kind of use this view as reference for putting down that circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use my grids to kind of snap, and then I'm going to move the lampshade into place. So I think I'm going to start, well, I could make a circle. I think I will go ahead and make a circle. I may just end up using it for reference. And this is a great reason to kind of get the, to maybe turn off my object snaps, because I actually want to just snap to the origin right now. So if I could, sorry, I'm having trouble actually turning off my snaps without disabling my screen recorder right now. So, hi everyone. So I'm just having kind of a small issue here. So this is one reason, maybe just for me right now, why it would be good to kind of just turn off the floor lamp layer. That would take care of a lot of my problems. And put the poly surface actually on there, because I'm unable to disable my snaps right now. But I will go ahead and just, it doesn't really matter at this point where I draw the circle as long as I stay within a plane. So if it, right now obviously it's snapping to like the top of that reference line that I drew, which is not a terrible place, but it's not exactly where I wanted it. It's fine. As I said, I'm having a kind of unique issue with disabling my object snaps. Because the pause button for my recording is directly on top of the disable all command, and I can't seem to change that. So here's a circle that's a little bit bigger than the base as promised, and I'm just going to use this circle as a reference. I think I'm actually going to use the star shape, which is even more fun. And we can kind of find it under here, under the polygon shape and the Polygon Star. And these are just sort of 2D shapes to kind of get you going. And so we can use the center that we used before. And for number of sides, I don't really want it to be like pentagonal. I want it to be probably like, maybe like 30 sides. So I want it to be like kind of an old school, like ruffled lampshade. And you can see here that I can just basically kind of pick 2 origin points for that. And I think actually I might try even more sides to get that folding effect a little bit finer. So I think I'll go for 40 here. Of course, there's a practical limit, you know, to how many sides you can make. This looks about reasonable. So you may be asking yourself, okay, thanks, Meg. How am I going to get this shape into anything other than a cylinder? Because we've certainly practiced a couple times in our, videos and lectures how to take this shape. Go ahead and get rid of this reference for now. How to take this shape and how to extrude it into kind of a straight line. Well, we can certainly kind of do things just a tiny bit differently here, but keep them somewhat similar. So we can take this planar curve, which it is just still a planar curve. It's a slightly more complicated one than some of our shapes before. And we can go to the solid menu, and we're going to extrude it in a tapered fashion. And so you can see we can move up from here, and we're given a sort of draft angle. And so the draft angle is really sort of like the angle at which it tapers on the sides. So, well, to me it looks like it could use a little more draft. So I'm going to maybe turn this to like a 4 or a 5 and see where that gets us. Obviously I want to move kind of straight up, so you can see it's sort of snapping in a little bit of a strange way, and that's okay, as long as you kind of, I'm gonna turn, yeah, okay, so then we kind of get back up to where we need to be with ortho mode. One thing that I could certainly consider doing, aside from disabling my object snaps, is disabling this smart track just for now so that it doesn't do this. And this is an example of like maybe not what you want out of an object snap. And in fact, I think there's one surefire way for me to disable my snaps, and that is to just do this. Oh, sorry, I wasn't thinking. So right in this this one moment, before I'm going to repeat the command and I'm going to disable my snaps before I do it. So I'm going to turn Smart Track on, and the disable all command is not working either. That's interesting. Okay, well, I will continue along happily, I suppose. So once again, that's a extrude curve tapered. And sometimes, you may have to find yourself like repeating commands in Rhino. Oh, there we go. Good. The reason you would need to kind of repeat commands in Rhino is because you, may have some setup issue that's kind of bugging you. And so it's totally fine to like back out of a command like this and change the parameters to kind of figure out what you want to do. Of course, the other option here, with this kind of snapping issue, kind of not maybe doing exactly what we want, the other issue that we could just sort of like, force the issue, we could just type the number in, and I think that is what I'm going to do. I'm kind of just eyeing the distance right now down here. So this is reflecting the total distance of the extrusion, and I think around 10 inches sounds pretty good. So I'm going to just go with that, and then you can even set a direction if you want to kind of like make sure that things are going to go your way. So this is definitely the direction of our extrusion. And then here we want 10. Damn. It's annoying. So to get into any function again, you can basically just hit enter. So I'm kind of curious. So the other thing I can do to kind of like address this snapping issue, which is probably an issue that you will have, is that I can start to turn these off individually to kind of force the issue. And then I could also go ahead and just disable ortho and planar. So right now we're 100% snapping to the grid. So I'm going to bring up the right view just to see if that kind of addresses this problem a little bit better. You can see right now you can get lots of really interesting unintended effects with this command. Of course, not what we're trying to do, but okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select solid here. And I'm also going to, under corners, yeah, that should be good. I'm going to go ahead and kind of like set a direction for it. And so I'm going to use this, actually going to activate my midpoint snap for just a second so that I can snap to the midpoint of this line here. And then I'm going to just bump this straight up because that is indeed the direction that we want to go in. So I'm going to go ahead and count my blessings and just kind of take this. That was behaving a tad strange. Oh yeah, wow, still behaving a tad strangely. Okay, I'm going to try one more time, and then if it doesn't work, I'm going to come up with a different plan. So it's almost like maybe the draft angle might be a little bit wonky. So I'm going to try just playing around with that a little bit and just trying a different number value. And I'm guessing that that's probably it as I look at it in perspective. It looks like when the draft angle changes, it basically becomes kind of like impossible for it to resolve at some point. So I think this is going to end up maybe having to be like a really shallow sort of ring or something like that. That's really, really interesting. Yeah, I mean, you can see here it's like not filling in all the surfaces, which just really indicates to me that it's, you know, having some sort of issue. Pushing it as a solid might help. Of course, I'm not really that committed to it, and it looks like, as you can see, it looks like it didn't fill in. So this typically is not something that is going to be like kind of unsuccessful, this tapered function, but obviously you can see it didn't work kind of in this context. So I'm going to kind of give you another solution to this problem of how to make a kind of grooved and tapered surface. So yay! So what we can do is we can use a different method, which is called rail revolve. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this object and I'm going to replace it and make a top. So I'm just going to do, copy paste, and then I'm going to bring it up to the sort of height that I want, which is about 10 inches. And I'm going to take this kind of inner circle and I'm going to scale it down a bit to kind of reflect the taper. So I'm just going to activate the regular scale thing. And I can use this midpoint again as a reference point. That's totally fine. And then I could even use the edge of one of these pieces as a point. I'm probably going to go activate my end and near, since I'm I think my snaps are going to be less traumatizing right now. So that should be about okay in terms of like having an upper boundary to this thing. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a line that connects two of these corners. So it doesn't really matter which, this one and this one, sure, why not? And you can see on in our perspective view that there's that kind of connecting line right there. So this, instead of doing kind of a tapered extrusion here, I'm going to use a totally different method. I'm going to use what's called the rail revolve method. And so what I'm going to do is it asks me to select a profile curve. So that's my connecting line. And then to select a rail curve. And then it asks me for a start and end of the axis. And there we go. We should have probably done that in the first place. So what that doesn't really give us is, it doesn't give us like 100% perfection. It also does not give us, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. It also doesn't really give us like a sort of solid object. So that's no big deal. I can take this object right now, and what I want to do, I want to really make this like kind of finished. Instead of having it have this kind of like zero thickness, I think I'm going to go ahead and produce it as an object that has like a slight thickness. So I'm going to go up to solid and do cap planar holes. And now that it's got the holes capped, you can see both of the holes are capped. I can actually use a different command on it called the shell command. And the shell command is going to do as promised. It's going to kind of shell it out. And so we actually, in this case, want to remove the, I'm going to have to do that again. We're going to have to remove the top and the bottom face. But we're not going to remove them. It's just sort of like, which areas do you want to be hollow? And then it asks us for a thickness, and we're going to want to be somewhat careful with that, because we want to make sure that that thickness is able to kind of fit into some of these small folds. So each of these squares is 1/4 inch. So I think I'm going to make the thickness on this 1/8 of an inch, which would be 0.175 or 0.125. And just click done. It is probably going to take a second. Yep. Okay. And so now, as you can see, this has gone from being sort of like a paper thin nothing object to being an object that has like some kind of thickness and some presence. So let's bring back our sort of other thing here. And gosh, what else does this light need? Well, it needs a light bulb. It probably needs some kind of structure to come up from the top and hold the lampshade. So that doesn't sound like, you know, 3D modeling is sort of like, do you want to get into that level of detail? Yeah, maybe. So let's go ahead and really quickly make like what's called a sort of, you know, a harp and a structure. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this lampshade in my floor lamp layer right now. And by doing that, and going ahead and turning it off, and I'm going to kind of like enter this sort of like, you know, drawing space again. And I think I don't want to like make my life harder than it really needs to be, which apparently is super hard. So I'm just going to draw a control point curve that kind of comes up out of the base, and then works sort of like I am drawing these kind of somewhat symmetrically, but it's not really super, it's not totally necessary, I don't think. Of course, you can also take a half of a curve and then rotate it. So I'll get in here just so they're symmetrical. Okay. So this is going to basically be like my kind of like, you know, this like a little metal thing that holds the lampshade up. And I'm going to go ahead and just draw in the lines that kind of support the lampshade. And again, I sort of feel like we're not going to kind of get into like a crazy level of detail. I'm not going to be sort of thinking about this so that is kind of good enough, and now all I really need to do is take this this one object and maybe copy it. Well, I'll use the rotate function actually. And what I want to do is I want to make like 3 copies of this. So I'm going to start here and make 1 copy here and make 1 copy here. And then those are going to be sort of like these little, you know, prongs that hold the thing. And then also, here's a shocker for you. It looks like I made a mistake with this piece. And this is, again, the reason why you really do need to use kind of ortho and planar when that's what you're actually trying to do. It looks like I misplaced this 1 point, and you can see it kind of caused a little bit of havoc. So I'm going to just kind of get it back into shape here. And it looks like now, because it's looking for a midpoint, I do actually want it to be, you know, flat. So this would be a great time to undo that object snap because it's kind of causing me pain. And apparently still is. Also, these other object snaps. So there's definitely a point at which the object snaps kind of become more of a problem than a help. And disabling them is not a bad idea in certain contexts. But as you can see, we kind of, you know, got around that quickly enough. So now I think this little structure right here is going to, as I said, I was like, oh, let's make it out of metal. So we can kind of give this like instant thickness. This is one of my like favorite things to do in Rhino. It's like instant thickness powder. So we can come over here to the solid menu and we can use the pipe function. And it will basically just construct a tube or a pipe around these lines. And so I would say in terms of thickness, probably a 1/4 inch would be, you know, useful right now. So there they are. And if you want to get really like detail oriented, you can certainly think about maybe trimming these or whatever. But now we've sort of got something, some kind of gesture that, you know, is fictionally like holding up the lampshade. And then, of course, we do also want a light bulb. And because this is kind of an interior object, we like in other words, it's inside the lampshade. I don't think that we need the crazy level of detail that you would have for like a normal light bulb. I think we can just quickly draw one. And I'm going to disable ortho at this point because I do want to kind of like make some natural curves. And so we're just sort of like gesturing, you know, the idea of a light bulb, and we're going to go ahead and revolve this. Later, we will actually turn this into a light source. So that's going to be fun. And we're going to full circle this. So let me go ahead and get the rest of these objects kind of moved into our floor lamp thing, and move objects to this layer. Yes, and so you may notice that we have all these curves left over. If you want to make big changes to an object that you've made, I find it a really good idea to save all of these curves, because then if you need to reconstruct any of the surfaces, you can go ahead and do that. So I actually keep a layer in Rhino, in my Rhino files, called construction curves. Okay, and I'll move that in there. And so I'm going to leave you until the next video in just a second here, but I do want to kind of show you that now we have our table and we have our floor lamp. Whoops. Ta-da. Just going to scooch this over a little bit. So next, I think we are going to explore some other methods of using repetition, and I'm going to make a chandelier. So I will see you all in the next video.